Okay, welcome to another episode of the Collegiate Exclusive Podcast. This is officially episode number 11. We are getting deeper and deeper into double digits now, and we are deeper and deeper into the Collegiate Rocket League fall semester. This is a pre-recorded episode for those wondering why we may not interact with Twitch chat at all. I'll probably be in Twitch chat while this is happening, but Mr. Timmy here has to call some real sports. So, TJ, I know you're looking forward to your busy evening, huh?
I mean, I'm back to back with scrims and work, so that's on me, guys, that it's pre-recorded. So unfortunately, I will not be sitting here actively arguing my takes, but I will try to talk as much trash and bother as many people as possible because now's the best time to do it.
Yeah, you still got Twitter. Don't worry. We'll have plenty of debates on Twitter, I'm sure. But yeah, let's get into it since we do have a limited time frame. But this little thing called the CRL Open Qualifier happened this weekend, and the last episode we had, we broke down who we thought would make it out of each Open Qualifier, and we were mostly right because most of the top 8 teams made it, but there were some big upsets. So we're gonna go pool by pool and go through results there. So starting in pool 1, nothing really crazy here, TJ, except for maybe St. Edward's beating LCU in 5, which I don't even know if that's too crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if crazy is the right word. I think it's a pleasant surprise to see that St. Edward's is finally being the contending roster that worried us, but is now starting to find their rhythm. Now, as I say that, obviously, as you guys can see, it was a pretty normal pool down below. Florida having a great run, but again, not really facing too much competition. And then St. Edward's DQs, which I think it was because Tater had to catch a flight because he was actually at the Scenic City Invitational with all of us. So that really does suck for St. Edward's. And I think that they maybe could have made things interesting. I think Northwood still makes it out without getting reset by any means, but it does suck that they didn't get the chance to play LCU once again.
Yeah, that was the official reason. He was in Chattanooga playing with the team, which is where they played a lot of CRL, and then his flight was at 6 p.m. Eastern time, which he said that it was going to cost $500 to rebook. And if they had looked competitive against Northwood in the upper bracket finals, then they would have rebooked it. But because it was pretty one-sided, then they just decided to FF and try their luck in the open quals. So that is the official reason, and fair enough. That's just the way it goes sometimes when you're playing a LAN the same weekend as CRL. So pool 1, not too crazy outside of that story. And then pool 2, things got a little weird, and your boys were a part of that.
Yeah, so we had one of the few bracket resets of the entire weekend. I'm not going to sit here and make excuses. We obviously playing a CRL event at LAN. Our rosters had a lot of highs. We've won an open bracket reset before, and then we almost lose with the bracket reset potential with it before. So we have truly seen the best and the worst of playing big CRL events at LAN. And this weekend was simply no other. Now, granted, I could sit here and make excuses all day, but we really didn't have any issues other than Michigan State. They are a good roster. I won't sit here and lie. And Indiana Tech were great too. Yeah. Granted, we got to beat that roster 2 times in one day, so I feel great about them. But Michigan State, we don't have a lot of experience with. So I won't lie. They caught definitely me, not my players. They caught me off guard with my notes and what I was preparing for. I won't lie. But my players are obviously seasoned veterans, and they were ready to go. So we were able to make it happen, getting the bracket reset.
It would have been weird not to have Concord in league play. I think that's the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway from that. So shout out to Michigan State for stepping up. I mean, this win over Indiana Tech, that 3-1, is, in terms of power rankings context, actually pretty massive, because I had Indiana Tech at 11 when I made my rankings on Friday, and until Sunday, I think that held up pretty well. But Michigan State is even better than we had initially anticipated. So that was a stacked pool. I mean, with you guys, Indiana Tech and Michigan State, and then when you're looking at the 33 through 48 range, Drexel, Conestoga, Tigres, and UC Santa Barbara was actually taking some names as well. In the lower bracket, they ended up beating, Carthage Black is the B team, but UCSB has been actually getting some wins elsewhere, but I'm sure we'll cover them another time.
Yeah, you have more knowledge on. I actually haven't even seen the USCB roster. I was more so paying attention to Tigre's run and
Yeah.
also Conestoga beating Drexel. We have talked about that Conestoga roster and how good they've looked in terms of top 32, top 48 contention, and they keep finding decent results. Now, granted, I don't know where you put Drexel in the mix of that. We've talked about that roster pretty heavily over the last 2 episodes, and unfortunately, they've had a very rough start to the season. So, will that win mean something in another month? I don't know yet, but Conestoga's got a lot of room to prove themselves regardless.
And then in Pool 3, so St. Clair's pool. So far, all top seeds making it, and St. Clair also made it with little to no hassle. Though a Game 5 against Boise State's a little bit of hassle. Not too shocking considering the caliber of Boise State and how good we know them to be. But then down in the lower brackets, Boise State actually gets upset by a George Mason team that they 3-0 swept in uppers. So that was a rough loss for the Broncos there. And GMU, this is without memory, by the way, made this run to top 2 in their pool. So all my proto believers can emerge from the woodwork after this George Mason run.
Well, first off, Proto, congrats to you for how well you looked throughout the weekend, because George Mason really struggled on land, but for them to piece this run together, I'm very impressed with. Now, my follow-up to that is that there was a lot of disappointment in this pool. Bepic, if you don't mind scrolling up to winners real quick, the big thing that bothers me is Shawnee gets the 2-0 win over Brock, proceeds to get a game off of St. Clair, and we'll talk about their losers' performance in a second, but also George Mason doesn't get a singular game on Boise. Now, granted, it doesn't matter in losers, but like winners was very weird, and Boise getting 5 on St. Clair, I think based off of what we've talked about in the last episode, this isn't a surprising result. It's a little shocking, but it's not something that catches us off guard. I mean, you've been a Boise believer. I was not a Boise believer, so now I have no excuse. But then when you go to losers now, we can talk about all the disappointment down here. First off, Brock losing to Northeastern. That is both a exciting fact and a disappointing fact. Northeastern and Harley Quinn finding wins, I always am here for. But Brock, after how high we were on them in the preseason, then losing best of threes, you can only put it on them so far because it is best of threes, but it still should be winning and winnable games. Not to mention Humber Esports, a team that we were not familiar with, who came out of nowhere and kind of surprised us all. So shout out to them. And they got a game off of Shawnee. Shawnee not getting a game off of George Mason. That's expected, but also disappointing for Shawnee. And then you want to talk about the disappointment, Boise State. You go to 5 with St. Clair winners final, and you don't even get a chance at them one more time. That is just awful.
Right, and this is the sort of bloodbath that is CRL Open Quals. The George Mason and Boise State knocking each other out in the brackets. Boise knocking GMU to lowers, and GMU knocking Boise State out completely. And I mean, talking about Brock, I mean that's a roster that we had in our top 48s. Fairly high because of the names attached, but now we actually have results outside of maybe placement matches in NECC or wherever Brock is playing this season. So shout out to Northeastern for getting that win. Yeah, best of 3, but still it's a win to place top 6 in your group. And then Humber, still don't know who they are, honestly. So I gotta learn about Humber apparently, because we always get these pop-up schools in qualifiers like this. Humber might be one of those that maybe stays the same throughout the opens in the coming weeks, or maybe we don't see him again. I'm not sure.
I will say this as well. I'm going to kind of spoil some power rankings. I did not see Humber in either one of our top 48. So to the Humber guys, we are sorry. And we respect your run, but we haven't seen you in anything else. So that is not top 48 for us, but impressive nonetheless. But this pool overall, weird, but not the weirdest.
Yeah, come play show matches if you want to prove yourselves further, Humber. But moving along, another top seed makes it through. Winthrop in Pool 4. They beat everyone they had to beat, and no Game 5s as well. I mean, 3-0 St. Clair Gold, 3-1 Davenport, 2 times in a row. So Winthrop will make it to league play, which is good for CRL. We needed Garrett G in CRL. So I'm glad the normies of the CRL and Rocket League space actually get to see him, Percy, and T. Carell playing in league play.
Yeah, and this is not any shock. I think that no matter where Garrett signed, he was going to be an instant contender in the space. Luckily, he gets probably the most talented roster on paper right now. And unfortunately for Davenport, I just don't think that they're balanced enough. If you give Cam and Brock another Rank X player, I think that maybe this series does go to 5 in winners, and then maybe Winthrop locks back in. But unfortunately, Bolte is great. Do not get me wrong. But I just think that there's too much of a disconnect between the RLCS experience of 5 members in that versus the one standout as well. I will say this was probably and respect to these teams, this might have been the most boring pool. I think that almost the seeding was probably almost perfect in this pool. Bruton Parker going to losers final, that was expected. St. Clair Gold getting beat by them, that was expected. If you want to make arguments about losers 4, 5 and the quarters, you can, like Clemson beating Bruton Parker Academy, I'll hear you out on. But outside of that, this was a pretty average pool.
Yeah, I mean, it knocks Bruton Parker Academy out of my top 48. I didn't look through yours just yet, but
they're not in mine.
Yeah, we had them there last week, and this sort of loss, if you're on the edge, will knock you out of that top 48. But shout out to Pincus Cat, his new UND roster making a good run, falling to St. Clair Gold, but fair enough. You did your hard work in the best of threes, which I'm with you. This is the most interesting part of the bracket right here, with FIU going down to St. Ambrose, who I still don't know and we can look at, but Shalonk, Astonic, Voltic Vibes, and Flamethrower. TJ, you know any of those?
Astonic, I believe, sounds familiar, but I can't sit here and vouch for him, so maybe.
Well, they ended up beating FIU and then losing to Arizona State. So that's a boring pool 4. So we're gonna move on, because this is where it starts going insane, especially in pool 5, where the top seeded Akron don't even place top 2.
Where do you start with this pool? There's a lot of small upsets that we can build up to the big one with. First of all, let's talk about Cleveland State beats what oh, wait a minute. I almost just absolutely slaughtered their name. Waukesha, right?
Waukesha.
Sorry, that's my fault, Gio. If you're watching it, that's on me. So for WCTC, we'll stick with that. This roster losing to Cleveland State was not on my bingo card. Sac State beating Georgia State, not on my card. York and OC going to 3. I actually am pleasantly surprised by that result. I think that it's funny that OC almost lost that, but it was expected. And then OC, we know this roster is talented. We've always thought this roster is talented. But after their falling out almost last year, at least in terms of their previous fall results into spring results, they really looked like they weren't going to bounce back. But whatever happened over the summer, the team looks great. And I'm actually excited to see them in league play. But Kennesaw State, I mean, man, this was their chance. This was Flitz and Kronovi's, or not even just Kronovi. This was Flitz, I think, his best chance at CRL since league play used to be top 16. And they went like 0-8 or whatever it was that year. So I really hate it for them, because they looked so good in losers, and then they just couldn't find it against OC.
Yeah, I don't put a ton of stock in best of threes when it comes to judging rosters that I have seen other results from. So talking about these best of threes, like OC beating York in 3, whatever, they get the win. Cleveland State beating WCTC in 3, I think that means Cleveland State's better than we expected of them. I think that was my takeaway for this Cleveland State team. But then Oklahoma Christian go into game 3 and then running through Kennesaw State, Akron, and then Kennesaw State again shows a lot, because you said they must have turned something around during the summer. It had to have been after pre-jump, after they lost to King University playing with Big Wade, and they bombed out before playoffs in pre-jump. So Oklahoma Christian have put it together for the biggest day in CRL fall, maybe outside of the fall championship. So good on them. I am really glad to see this team still hitting high peaks. I'm not writing off the fact that they have hit some pretty low lows in their CRL and collegiate tournament experiences, but hey, they made it to league play. They are there, TJ. And there were some people that had them at like 22 or not even in their top 32 going into the open quals.
Well, shoot, it might have been. I don't think it was us. I think I had them at 17,
14
which still
for
is
me.
low. Okay, all right. So never mind, we're good. So the rest of the pundits, all right, you guys can learn. But I think me and you are hopefully some of the last OC believers, at least in the top 15. I know that the Champ League guys, I think, rank them as contenders as well, or like potentials, or
They were
something
long
like that,
shots,
whatever it was.
is what they were.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? Never mind. All right, you know what, Bepic? Me and you might be the only OC supporters. We just might be. But regardless, yeah, I love what I see from those teams. KSU having a good run. We want that roster to be good. TNT has had so many ups and downs, especially when your lineup changes all the time. He played with Dylan more than he played with Flitzit sometimes last year. And then not to mention that Curry was basically not around for the spring. So I'm happy for TNT now to actually get to work in a system that is consistent and that will be grinding not only within the CRL Opens, but there'll be a DreamHack too.
Yeah, and hopefully playing in that close qualifier that is DreamHack weekend. But that's a conversation for later on down the line. We'll move on, even though that was, I think, one of the most chaotic pools. Actually, no, I want to talk about Akron going out, because that was a roster that, for preseason rankings before CRL, a lot of people had them pretty low in their top 8s, top 12s, and I didn't understand why going into the fall, and now I further don't understand where this roster is at after, we haven't seen full-strength Akron. Well, actually, we have seen them. Last week, they 4-1 San Edwards in NECC, and then this weekend, they play with Melio at the Scenic City Invitational instead of 5-up, and, they go out top 8, which is whatever. They're playing without their regular starting third, but then that bleeds over into CRL quals. So I wonder what's happening with Akron right now.
This is one of the few times that I get to say I told you so. Me and you argued about Akron. We've argued about Akron pretty heavily. And the take that I have always said is that as of last spring, this team is simply not variable. And when Concord got their hands on him in Texas, I think it showed that pretty obviously. And the fact that I saw Crispy laughing at them mid-game, I think that was probably maybe a little heavier of an indicator than we thought. Granted, that's a grand final at a big LAN, so I'm gonna sound like I'm hating, but based off the gameplay that I've seen, when it matters the most, I don't think this team has it. But I will make a hot take as well. I think that if Akron never shows up to Chattanooga, I think this roster makes it. I think Akron and Bullseye playing with Melio and having as bad of a weekend as they did, I think that this probably derailed the team. I think it honestly did. And then my other hot take following that is that we have not gotten to scrim Akron once at all. So from what I understand, 5-up and his practice schedule with Akron hasn't really been there either. So I don't think this roster was ready. I don't think they were prepared. And with the format being as shallow and as shafty as it was, teams like this will get punished.
Okay, they better be grinding for those 3v3 opens starting next Wednesday, like week from today. They had better be ready to make a run, because if they're not at least a series away from making it to League Play Split 2, then the fall has been a catastrophic failure for Akron. But we'll see them back here in a week or so. We can move on now, but that was worth talking about. And I'll take the I told you so. So that's fair enough. Sometimes I'm wrong. A lot of times I'm wrong.
You get me on this one, though.
I was okay. I still was wrong with this prediction, but I looked pretty good. The fact that Syracuse was almost forcing that second best of 5 against West Virginia, because I said that I thought Syracuse was going to upset West Virginia in this pool, and they lost to Fisher in 5, which. Hey, fair enough. The Fisher got him in the best of 5 the first time around, but then in lowers, Syracuse get their revenge after running through James Madison, who have looked good this week, Leslie, who have looked good this fall, and then another nail biter game 5, and then they almost forced that bracket reset here. I love this Syracuse team. I think their grind got very close to paying off, and I'm excited to watch them these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, look, I got to be honest. After Syracuse at the PEC Showcase, I was kind of struggling to support this team. And Fisher, I was pretty harmful towards as well. I am very impressed by what both these rosters bring to the table. I think the big key And Beppy, you can show the losers bracket too.
Yeah.
I think the big key with these rosters was that I was not prepared for how messy that Fisher, Leslie, and Syracuse were all going to get. The way that I envisioned it, I assumed Fisher to be slightly ahead by a decent margin off of Reales and Adam alone. And then I expected Syracuse and Leslie to be a good match. But instead, it was Syracuse and Fisher are neck and neck. And Leslie is more maybe comparable to a potential James Madison than they are a Syracuse, which is a crazy statement for me to say based on how high I've been on this team. But I was pretty disappointed by how Leslie did against Syracuse. But Syracuse is hot, so your perception has to change.
Yeah.
And for Fisher, it's kind of some heartbreak. I think a lot of people, when you look at the Syracuse roster and you say it's a whole bunch of rank A, rank B plus, like they're good, but they're not going to have the ice against a few rank X players, right? I can't imagine what Reales and Adam were thinking after that losers final, because if it goes to 5, I wish I had the replays for that one, because Syracuse, if they're going to be a system team, what a better time to showcase it than in an open format where the top 8 are not going to be playing every week. Syracuse could be real bracket demons.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it a lot after Tiz told me this, but he was on 120 past 2 a couple of weeks ago, and leading into the CRL Open Quals, I don't imagine that dipped too much. I know Lesser wasn't too far behind him, so Syracuse want it bad, and I think them beating Fisher is a quality win, looking good against West Virginia, sets them up for future runs. But good on West Virginia. It's another top seed making it to league play, and with Gyro in the starting lineup, that was one of the questions we had, was how was West Virginia going to look? And even though it was close, they still won their games, and with this sort of bracket, that's what matters.
Yeah, no bracket reset. And you know, from where I'm sitting, I can't argue. So
yeah, true. I mean, yeah, it's a crazy format. And next pool we've teed up nicely. It's another bracket reset pool because Baylor made it through Ball State. Not just A, but B as well. And this pool was one of the most insane ones too, because Baylor lost in upper semis to Ball State's B team. And then Ball State's B team was apparently, according to Yags, a Game 5 open net miss away from being in the grand finals. But they don't get it done. They drop down. They lose to Baylor in 5, who looked red hot against Missouri, by the way. And then they bracket reset and double 3-1 Ball State. What on earth?
Yeah, so I'll start with the obvious point. Missouri being the next team out of these top 3, based on the hours that we're aware of this roster playing, this part was not surprising. Another kind of small result, GCU actually did better than I thought. We were talking about this roster barely, kind of in passing in the green rooms of the LAN and within this podcast as well. GCU, I originally was hating. Now I'm kind of have to look and maybe pay a better attention to the West Central Division NECC. Huntington did decent, making it to the Missouri game and lose quarters. That's fine too. And yes, I'm glad, because I was about to get to the Kaiser point. Yeah, Kaiser getting 2'd by Huntington is a little surprising. Also, Fuel is a roster we talked about last week, and they lose to GCU in 3. So those are all the sleeper results. But now let's get to the actual results.
Yes.
First off, Ball State Black is much higher in my eyes now. Beating Baylor, even if Baylor went out in losers finals to them twice, that is still a really good set of series. Not to mention that if the Game 5 miss net is true, I am actually very confused as to how Ball State went to 5 with their own B team. Because on paper, I know that Wova and Variety were fighting for the same spot. But also, I feel like that Oath and Guh should not be struggling by any means. So this result may be something to read into, but it doesn't matter. And you wonder why. It's because they're not in league play. They're going to have to fight their B team in the opens because Baylor decided, and I think with Hawkstar and Andy and Coach Stanley, this roster will be one of the most dynamic, one of the most dangerous, not just in a series, but per game in league play. And that is a scary thought.
Yeah, I was actually streaming the Baylor and Mizzou series, and I wasn't doing active casting. I was more watch partying it and just watching them. And so I reviewed that VOD as well on my YouTube yesterday. And JT looks so well improved since we first watched him when he was first starting to play with this team. He's not just a go fetch demos to allow Andy and Hoxer an easier time on the field sort of player. He is actually a consistent part of the rotations and looks good on the ball as well. They look like a near complete team with a 2K player play with Andy and Hoxer. So good on Baylor. Their reward is the league play that is as stacked as CRL has ever been. So we'll see how they do with the top 8 teams. But man, if they can beat Ball State back to back, if they can beat a Ball State black team that was looking fantastic this weekend, then maybe they shock some teams, because maybe there's some openings like West Virginia they could beat, Cumberland's a team they could beat. There's a world in which they maybe pull off a couple of upsets and make top 4.
We also do play them this Sunday. So
good luck.
From my side of things, I hope that it is a nice little 3-1. And I hope that we get to kind of help put Baylor in perspective of where they should be ranked. But I agree with you. Baylor, I think, could be a top 4 contender. I just don't know how they're going to match up against us. I don't know how they're going to match up against St. Clair Green, against Winthrop. And also not to mention that Baylor actually forfeited against St. Clair Green in Nace. So I don't know what in the world that like where they look outside of the one Ball State win, which I think that of all the pools you pick an upset in, that was probably the easiest one to do so. We all expected that Ball State Baylor game to be good. So tough loss for Ball State, great looks for Baylor, but where do they go from here?
For the record, that NACE series was a 3-1 for St. Clair. I don't know if they just didn't fix the FF on the website or not, but that did happen last night. And it looked about as you would expect. Baylor was competitive with St. Clair, but it was a 3-1 where St. Clair handled them. So nothing too big there, but I do need to update that, because I noticed that while the series was going on, I was like, man, I guess Baylor didn't check in or something. So hopefully that gets reverted. But
weird that they didn't fix it. But anyways, that's still a decent result.
Well, back to fairly boring brackets, unless you are an Ole Miss fan, as Cumberland qualified to their bracket with a couple of sweeps over ETSU and playing Maryland as well, as Rochester Christian DQ'd. They were playing on LAN at the Michigan LAN this weekend, and so they didn't end up competing in CRL, and so Maryland was the biggest surprise out of this pool, though they didn't really have a hope of touching grand finals.
Yeah, this one, I feel like Cumberland, if they got a Baylor, if they got a Indiana Tech, I think that this matchup is way deeper. But of all the teams in the top 12 you could have as your second seed, with all due respect to ETSU, they looked great on LAN against us. Yep. But I feel like for some odd reason, of all the teams to get their number this early, it is by far Cumberland. They've looked really good against the ETSU roster, other than, of course, the SCL matchup. But outside of that, Cumberland's got this matchup easily. And this one was a little disappointing to see how much ETSU struggled.
Yeah, I mean, it's now 4 series played against each other in the last week. I mean, if you're going back to Monday at least. So Cumberland lost that first one, but won 3 consecutive in arguably the more important matchups. And then down below, Maryland went on a nice run. I don't know what happened to Ole Miss. I remember reading a Lunar reply giving an excuse as to why they performed so poorly, but I don't remember what it is. So Ole Miss, I mean, they lost 4-1 to Indiana Tech in NECC last week, and now have lost to Borregos in a best of 3 and Maryland in a best of 5.
Yeah, I mean, I get so confused talking about these rosters, because I love that Maryland looks great. I'm all here for that. But for Ole Miss to be losing 3-0, that really, really throws me off guard. Also for Borregos, we didn't rank the Spanish rosters last week because we didn't know if they were playing or not, because we haven't seen them register for anything. But I'm glad they showed up. But I also believe that they would be the favorites in that Maryland matchup. So great that they are back in contention for top 48 conversations, top 32-ish, but you can't lose to Maryland. But again, this is a kind of boring pool. Like, you really have a very clear disconnect. I think this is where the seeding was the worst across the CRL committee. This pool makes no sense. I don't know who the third seed was. I guess it was supposed to be Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ole Miss.
So, and then your second seed was supposed to be ETSU, first seed Cumberland. Like, I see the vision, but you know, I'm a little confused. I think there wasn't enough recency bias for these rosters.
I mean, I think a lot of it was thrown off by the fact that Ole Miss had a bad day, whatever the reason for that was, and that Rochester Christian didn't show up at all. That's why it got weird, and it affected everyone except for ETSU and Cumberland, which I think realistically, even if Ole Miss have a good day and if Rochester Christian show up, then it's still ETSU and Cumberland in that grand finals. I don't think that changes much. So I mean, that's CRL quals, man. It's as stacked as ever. Things can get weird, but ultimately the top seeds are probably going to make it. And 6 out of the 8 top seeds did. So shout out to Baylor and Oklahoma Christian for pulling off those upsets. And that was, I mean, overall great CRL day. That was great content. I think a lot of people had fun. There were some disappointments, but at the end of the day, you're either in league play or you get 3 shots in the open 3v3s. So here we go.
Again, I've made my points on the format. I still think it's a little too punishing. Like, the fact that 5-Up has to play in opens is quite funny to me. The fact that GA has to play in opens and Oath, quite funny to me. I hate that it's not top 12. I think that that's the bare minimum. Top 16, I think, would be great. But also, seeing the talent disconnect between some of these pools, I can see the argument for why top 8 was maybe the agreed upon decision. But format is very harsh, and unfortunately, some people learned it harder than others. Luckily, we didn't. That's really all I can say from my end.
Yeah, you guys definitely backed up the talk after losing to Michigan State. They told me the excuse they didn't have headphones or something for the first series they played against them, and then 3-1, 3-1. You can't argue with that. So good on your boys.
Not even our best excuse. Our best excuse is that we didn't have any water for 4 hours. That was our best excuse. But anyways, that's not for now or for later.
All right. Well, excuses irregardless. Let's talk about the LAN that you guys still won. Concord ends up winning the Scenic City Invitational. We talked about group play during the last podcast because we had results then. So we can talk about the bracket now, and I'll fix the cropping in a second. But this LAN was essentially top 8. UTK, Retirement Home, and George Mason were the only notable teams really in the lower brackets, as no one else put up a real fight with the top 8 seeds. But even then, I mean, big results start off the day. Bruton Parker upsets Cumberland. Indiana Tech looked phenomenal against St. Edwards and Bruton Parker. And so it was a fun bracket and a good coming out party for Indiana Tech and ETSU and Kennesaw, for all honesty.
Yeah, Indiana Tech looked incredible. I hate that they didn't get the chance to make it to the grand final, but also it was a battle of teams getting hot and cold on the day. Indiana Tech started off the weekend, and they looked wonderful. Group stage and also within bracket, they looked easily like the second best team there. But then when it really mattered and we got to those games on Saturday night, ETSU showed everybody that they're here to play. They handled Akron and got them out early, handled Bruton Parker, didn't even have to worry about Cumberland. And if you wonder why, it's because they lost to St. Edwards. So very, very confusing results there, because I really wanted the Cumberland ETSU matchup on LAN, and I think that ETSU wins it on LAN with how hot they were. Kennesaw also handling business, but didn't look great when it mattered. And then we got the matchup that I think we were waiting for the entire weekend, and we got ETSU versus Indiana Tech. But if my memory serves me correct, I believe it was a 4-1 still.
4-1. Indiana Tech didn't win a game until game 4. It was the same sort of rhythm as against Concord.
Yeah, and with all due respect to Indiana Tech, I love those guys, but like, we had full control of that winners final, and them getting game 4 didn't delay anything. And for losers finals, for when I got there in the morning and I saw that, it was about the same. They really just couldn't find momentum. And ETSU, I will say this, Kasai and Faris looked the best I've seen since they've moved to North America. I will stand on that right here, right now. That is the best I've seen those two look ever, at least in North America, not to mention on LAN as well. So it was a tall task, but it was disappointing.
I think there were a lot of stories of very good days for some rosters and very bad days. Like Saturday was a very bad day for Cumberland. They open up 10 a.m., losing to Burton Parker in 4 in that best of 5, by the way. And I just switched pages. But they lose to Burton Parker in 4. And then they lose to St. Edwards later on in the day, and that's might have been in 4 as well. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that was a Nolly masterclass, which even with Nolly peaking and putting up 1,000 points in game 3 of that series, that's still a set that Cumberland shouldn't be dropping. And so they had an awful Saturday that they turned around and recovered for to make CRL League play on Sunday. So at least they had that.
They also got to play ETSU in CRL in the same facility to clinch. And so, if you lose in bracket at LAN, but then you get a 3-0, 3-0 on LAN when it matters the most for CRL, I think Cumberland's not upset with the weekend, but there is a lot to learn because they simply should have never touched the loser's bracket until loser's final.
Yeah, honestly. And then Akron Glue doing worse than I was expecting with the Patty LAN buff legend, but losing to ETSU this weekend was not bad at all. They lost their first matches of the day on Friday and on Saturday, and then didn't lose until the grand finals after that. So credit to them. They did look fantastic. I love how Landon is slotting in with Kasai and Leo. He has found a role on that team, and they all had spotlight moments where they were able to show individually why they are top caliber players. And so ETSU will be talking a lot about over the course of the next couple of months. Kennesaw State, probably the same, but I'm liking what I'm seeing from them as well. It does feel like either Flitz is popping off or every game is a grind fest for the Owls, but I don't mind that style of Rocket League where they're just trying to out 50 their opponent until they get a decent looking offense.
Also, Kronovi was shooting lights out. I mean, unsurprisingly, his composure, ever since he's touched the game back in whenever he played SARP. I've never seen this guy sell. I've never seen this guy panic. And he is truly the best competitor in all of Rocket League. And you see it in moments like that. Now, granted, could he have played could he play better more consistently outside of just the offense? I think that right there is an argument to have. But whenever Kronovi was on the ball, pushing another team's half, it found the net 9 times out of 10. So some positives for KSU. I think for TNT and Flitz, really all 3 of them, you would love to see more of a defensive game plan, a more common defensive style they can rely on. It just felt like the Wild West when they were on defense, and things just got too messy, and they can't beat Kasai and Faris on their best with Landon playing out of his mind as well. It couldn't happen.
It was a Game 7 overtime, which...
Yes, I know.
It was a series. It was so strange because it felt like Kennesaw State was in control. They had a lead, it felt like, until they lost in Game 7 overtime. Like, that was probably the Rocket League series equivalent of losing a football game until you score the game-winning touchdown on the last play of the game. Because that was... I think Kennesaw State's wins were blowouts. ETSU had to win in long overtimes. And then they somehow forced Game 7, and Landon wins on 2 open nets that he scored, I think both actually from his defensive half. It was a strange series, worth the watch. I'd recommend going back and watching it at 8:30 in the morning that we worked that on Sunday. But it shows you that Kennesaw State are competitive right there with an ETSU team that I think is top 10. I'll spoil it now.
Yeah, that's fair. I will say that my take is more harsh because the way they looked against us going into that series, I was concerned about the defense. And also, I only got to watch the last 4 games of the series. So I didn't see the early part. So if there's context I'm missing, that's why my take sounds harsher. But regardless, both teams looked great. Again, going to Game 7 OT on LAN to clinch a spot and to go against us, I mean... I can't hate on that, not at all. Both those teams have been like hopefuls for us for a while, and I'm glad they're starting to find their way consistently into the top 12, top 13, conversations.
Takeaway should be that Concord, ETSU, Indiana Tech, and Kennesaw State all looked really good this weekend and will be hopefully looking just as good throughout the fall. But we do have to move on. We took a while to talk CRL quals and LAN. Real quick, I want to touch on CECC because they announced their 2 big regional qualifiers for the fall. Blocking our faces real fast. But the South qualifier had their dates announced and then amended. They will be the Open will be on the 18th and 19th of this month, and then the regional qualifier that everyone qualifies into will be the week after that, on the 25th, 26th, and then in November we'll have the West Coast qualifier for the for CECC. So make sure you know about that if you are in these regions. Get in the Esports U Discord to stay up to date so you can qualify for CECC. Hopefully, that's all I really wanted to talk about.
Those quals have always been messy. They've always been fun to watch. I know that Concord getting the CECC spot last year had to go to 7 with Burton Parker. And I think that series was like at 11 o'clock or something like that. Me and you were both there for that.
Yeah.
So we've seen the mess both on land, off land, across the nation. It's always something. So yeah, we're excited to cover those whenever they roll around here in the next few weeks. But also I'm intrigued to see what happens with the Western qualifier as well, with no Maryville. I'm very intrigued.
True.
I guess were they west or were they north last year? I don't remember. They would have been.
Missouri, I think, is Midwest still.
Okay, so and we haven't seen an announcement on the Midwest, so point still stands. We'll see what happens out of the West. Boise State should be fine.
That's usually Boise.
Out of the West. Yeah, it should be Boise fairly normally. But in the Midwest, other than Northwood, see what happens there.
All right, other LANs that were going on this weekend, there were 3 LANs. There were $15,000 in LAN winnings supposed to be given out. We talked about Scenic City. That accounts for 1/5 of that 15 grand. And then the State Line Showdown was a LAN that the Kansas City Pioneers were putting on. And to really no fault of their own, I heard this directly from players who love to complain about TOs. The LAN was cut short. This was happening at the Kansas City Speedway, and it featured Columbia, Kansas, Wichita State. That's the notable 3, honestly. And that's the reason they missed CRL. That's the reason these teams did not play in CRL on Sunday. And so they were set up for a Columbia versus Wichita State winners final. No shocker there. Actually, yes, a shocker there, but no surprise there. And then Generators apparently went out at the Kansas City Speedway and fried some PCs. So this is being rescheduled to online. So shout out to Kansas City Pioneers for putting on a halfway decent event and adjusting when stuff went awry.
Yeah, I mean, I can obviously give the insider perspective as I'm with my own org, obviously. I really appreciate what my team tried to set up, and it wasn't to any fault of their own, like you mentioned. They were completely hands tied when it came to these generators. The event being at a NASCAR track, there's only a few LANs that have ever happened at a NASCAR track. I believe there's been 2 in the last 3 years, and I have been involved with both of them.
Talladega, baby.
Oh, yeah, and Talladega, that was something. But I remember as a player at Talladega, it is almost impossible to calm or hear anything during the race. And so I know that for the players, if they had complaints, I would completely understand. But the point of that event is not for it to be some crazy top 5 marquee showdown. No hate to Columbia and Wichita, of course. But outside of them, the tournament's for fun, if we're being honest. It really is. And from what I heard from at least some other players, it seems like that was received well, but it wasn't the org's fault or the TO's fault. Kilk was the main TO on that event, and me and him talked the night of. The generators just completely went out, couldn't do anything about it, and players understood that the event had to be moved online. I believe they're getting started off tonight or tomorrow night, if my memory serves correct. So we'll see some results on that, hopefully by the end of this week. I haven't seen us post about it just yet, so I think we're still getting that kind of down. But that Columbia-Wichita State game will be one to look out for, and there is still a decent amount of money to kind of fight up for still.
It'll finally be a high-level series for Wichita State because people have not been ranking them well because they haven't played anything yet. So I'm just glad to have something finally to judge this new Knight-led Wichita State roster with. So I hope that gets sorted out in a way that is fair competition for those two, because I need an even series for Wichita State just to look good in. But we can move on to the other LAN that had some issues this weekend, and we can't talk about this for a long while because we only have like 25 more minutes to be recording. And so, TJ, I know you are putting out a video on this tomorrow. Is that right?
Yes, it'll go out tomorrow.
Okay, so in that case, I will give some context, I'll give my opinions, and then you can briefly give your opinions and then plug your own video. But here's what happened. I posted about this last week on a travel day. I happened to notice it and tweeted about it. Michigan LAN in Midland, Michigan, hosted by a kind of LAN cafe restaurant thing that's tied to a minor league baseball team out in Midland. $10,000 prize pool, which is what caught my eye. I was on Wikipedia. And so they had originally posted that their prizing split would be released after the competition, which seems suspicious. And I talked to a lot of people involved in the tournament organization and assisting with it, and I'm pretty confident in saying that a lot of their suspicious parts of this event were oversights. They didn't understand the TOS. They had a logical way of going about organizing their event, and that got to them to that conclusion. And then once they realized it was against TOS, they fixed it. And this original tweet really blew up because a lot of people, I mean, we're pretty jaded in the esports scene when it comes to tournament organizers and not paying out. So this LAN went on. It featured schools like Northwood, Rochester Christian, Mount Aloysius, and Michigan State's B team was there. Yes, Knock and Gribble, and I forget their third. And so it ran for the most part without a hitch, and then we had a bit of Twitter drama on it as St. Clair Saints Gold were also there. And they played CRL as a warm-up, same with Northwood, and they got disqualified for playing CRL as a warm-up prior to the event. They played through it, and they were on time for their series, but were still disqualified because of an email sent out that said, you cannot play in both because they're not accommodating you playing in both competitions. And so this was sent out a week or so in advance.
Yep.
And so this led to Northwood and St. Clair Gold still playing in CRL and then being disqualified for it and forfeiting their wins in a $10,000 tournament. And does that sum up the story pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a brief TLDR of the video to help fill in some gaps. So first off, I will say this. A lot of what True put in his tweet, there's only so much of this that is entirely true. Mm-hmm. And this is hearing from St. Clair, Northwood, and the TOs. The decision was official that if you played CRL at all, regardless of the schedule, because the schedule was rolling, mm-hmm, that if you played CRL, you were going to get DQ'd. So my backup argument, I talked to Matt Aloysius too. So my backup argument is, unfortunately for St. Clair, they made a decision to show up and play CRL. They actually were misunderstanding and also were mistold the schedule. And because of that, they actually accidentally played on setups at the LAN venue, and they actually delayed the event.
Okay.
So the reason why it was so harsh was because of that, and then that is also why Northwood got thrown under the bus, because yes, they also did play CRL, and you're not allowed to, but they actually weren't holding up the bracket. They were actually going back and forth between their facility on campus right down the road, mm-hmm, and the main baseball stadium for games. So. Yep. Overall, it was handled really poorly by everybody. There's not a side that's in the right, but my video will describe why Northwood was so, they were so involved in this event. Dangerously involved in this event. Michigan State was dangerously involved in this event too. And if you're watching this pre-recorded and you're wondering why Michigan State's A team did not play in this event, watch the video tomorrow. It'll make a lot more sense then. The Valorant side gets twice as worse.
All right. Well, hey, I mean, this sort of situation is why we kind of made this podcast and why we make the content that we do. We want to report on these unique situations and talk to the people involved because we know the people involved. So I'll be watching that video tomorrow for sure. But I also will say that on one hand, I think if you are going to run a LAN, you should do your best to accommodate for CRL qualifiers, as that should be the pinnacle competition in the CRL space. But on the other hand, if a TO tells you that you cannot play in CRL and their event, no matter how big the prize pool is, you have to make that choice. They're the ones putting the money up. You have to follow what they say and the guidelines they set for their tournament, as long as, of course, they're within the terms of service for the game. And that's my take on it, honestly. Communicate better and talk through things with your TO beforehand. But it does suck that St. Clair Gold did travel for this event and that they were DQ'd, and it was just a waste of a weekend overall for them. So I do hate that for them, but it is an experience that all around, hopefully we can learn from.
Yeah. The big thing personally is that St. Clair Gold had to spend a lot out of pocket for this event.
Yeah.
And my issue is not the fact that the rule was set. Well, that is an issue, but it's not my main issue. That the CRL rule was set. My next issue is the no mercy, because this program paid to be at your event, and it goes both ways. You have to respect the TOs, but these TOs, and specifically the group is Blockhouse. That's the main group in question. The Great Lakes Loons, I've actually heard incredible things about. That's the team who is the main team at this stadium. They were great, and they purely worried about the venue and the event outside of the tournament. So nothing bad to them. They were incredible. But Blockhouse, the actual tournament organizers, I don't agree with a lot of what happened there. And again, I'll talk about it more in the video tomorrow, but they really are going to lose. Like, I'd be surprised if they get a good tournament ever again. That's how bad they handled things. I think that every program should never go to a Blockhouse tournament from this point on. That's the way I view it.
All right. There you go. Watch your video tomorrow, everybody. That way you can be informed about what's going on there. But we will move on to actual results, as these are online results. Not so much LAN as stacked as the last weekend was for LAN events. We still have some important conference play going on. And NECC is playing tonight. This will be after our podcast, and actually during, while our podcast is being streamed. So definitely tune into NECC and check out the results there. We'll start in Group 1, or Group A of Division 1. And again, my cropping does not agree with NECC. So give me
Well,
a
you're
second.
doing that. We are going to probably try and quick fire through some of these predictions, I would imagine, as well, that way we have time. But for those of you who are not familiar with the way the Division 1 was split, Group A is St. Clair Green and Northwood and Akron Blue all in the same group. And for some reason, St. Clair Green and Northwood had to play the very first game of the season last week. But we can talk about the matchups tonight, and we can just go from there.
I'm still kind of cropping, so bear with me here.
I can go ahead. I'll give predictions.
Yeah,
let's
throw
throw some out there. All right, easy ones. Give me Northwood in 4. Give me St. Clair Green 4-1. I feel really good about those. Ole Miss Akron, give me Akron bounce back 4-0. I think that's a pretty gimme series. Kennesaw St. Edwards. Okay, this is where things get a little dicey. I think it easily goes to 6 or 7. It easily goes that far. But I want to say St. Edwards wins it in 6. That's how I'm leaning currently.
Okay, so I mean, I don't know if I'll do full predictions like series length, but I've got 2 trains of thought with the KSU St. Edwards, which I do think is the series of the week, if we're gonna apply that title to NECC Group A in Division 1, because they've played 3 times at this point. It went all 7 games on my stream in a best of 7. It went all 5 games in groups of the Scenic City Invitational, and then it was a 3-0 bit of a stomping in favor of Kennesaw State in bracket play of the Scenic City Invitational. And so if that trend is to continue, Kennesaw State should probably 4-1 St. Edwards. But I did talk to Nolly after that second series, and I was like, I like the rivalry that you guys are cooking up with Kennesaw. And he was like, yeah, they've gotten us the first 2 times, but we'll get the next one in a close best of 5, and then after that, it'll be our time to stomp. And so I'm thinking his train of thought is a little bit delayed on that. So I think St. Edwards, maybe they pull off an upset here. I honestly don't know if I would be brave enough to drop a prediction, but it'll hopefully be close for that sake of thinking that St. Edwards can beat Kennesaw State despite losing 3 in a row.
I think the other conversation worth having is your perception of upset as well. Like, I have Kennesaw at 13. I'm going to spoil. I have Kennesaw at 13, St. Edwards at 16. You have them a little further apart. I have them 3 spots apart. You have them 5 spots apart. And I won't reveal yours yet. But I feel like this is not, if St. Edwards wins this and it is a 7-game series, I don't believe it's an upset. I think it is a tough game for Kennesaw, but I don't believe it's viewed as a upset until St. Edwards can compound that into maybe a win over Indiana Tech as well. But for now, I think it's too early to tell who's the best roster out of these two. Yes, the LAN results and the show match results, I know, like, I'm willing to hear it out, but personally, based on what I've seen gameplay wise, I think Tater is going to be a brand new player. If Wellis shows up half as well as he does virtually every single time, I think they're going to be just fine. Also, the biggest point is how good Nolly's looked over the last week.
Yes.
It is night and day between 2 weeks ago, between last week, and I can only imagine how he's going to look this week.
I don't know what the change was. If it was the fact that they had their coach Beastbound with them this weekend while they were playing on LAN and in CRL quals as well. I don't know if that is the difference, but yeah, Nolly looks on a different level at the moment. He looks elite in CRL. So that's why I do hope this is a close series. And I mean, even though Kennesaw have put 3 wins over St. Edwards, I mean, upset's a word you maybe toss around lightly here. But, I mean, Indiana Tech get a shot at St. Clair, Leslie get a shot at Northwood, and Ole Miss get a shot at Akron. I honestly don't think we see any upsets there, where I think upset definitely is a bit more defined.
I will say a slightly interesting word interesting use of the word upset. I think if Indiana Tech pushes St. Clair to 6 or 7, I think that right there would be a result to look into.
Yeah, okay.
I believe play style wise, St. Clair Green should have no issue against that roster. But that's just me throwing out random thoughts. Also, if Akron Blue goes to 6 or 7 against Ole Miss, then I think their mental's chalked going into next week for the Opens. Or at least it will seem that way. We know how good that they can be on LAN and off, but I haven't seen it yet this fall.
All right, and then that's Group A. Everyone keep an eye on it. Group B as well, and the standings pulled up immediately. We should have some decent series between Fisher and LCU. Oklahoma Christian and Akron Gold could be good. Cumberland and Davenport might be a decent one, and that's a pretty stacked week for NECC Group B.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our group matchup, I'm not going to talk on. Love the Drexel guys, but I think we should be A-okay tonight. With OC and Akron Gold, I think OC now the prediction is 4-0 for them because they look so good. And if they start to slip again, then we can have a conversation about league play. But like now that they're a top 8 team, there's no excuse within NECC. They should be the clear top 3 and maybe even top 2, because I think that Davenport, Black, and Cumberland, if Cumberland look anywhere near as bad as they did this past weekend on Saturday and Friday, and even partially Sunday, then let's talk about Cumberland and maybe even Davenport if they can get out of there with a win. But I actually think the Fisher LCU series is a little more clean cut. LCU have kind of just been getting thrown around by higher level teams over the last few weeks. This is their first attempt at a more even matchup in a while. And also they struggled against Bruton Parker. I think Fisher win this one in 6, and I feel pretty confident in that game.
I mean, LCU did also play St. Edwards in CRO quals, and
fair.
I mean, they lost that in 5 as well. So they can't beat teams in like the 16 through 24 range right now, and that's an issue for them. They did get the FF win last week, which was the series that had everybody kind of ranking Oklahoma Christian really low because it was posted as a 4-0 in the NECC results, but it was actually a forfeit win for LCU, as Oklahoma Christian didn't know what time they were playing. So hopefully they do this week, as that was a whole big drama when it came to power rankings last week for people that didn't know it was a forfeit, because some of us did. Some of us read the colleague discussion channels and others did not, but it's all good.
We're gonna save our conversations. Eventually, we'll have to add a segment about power ranking people's power rankings. We'll have to add that on a few episodes later. But yeah, take all that with a grain of salt. But in terms of Div 1, I think that's really about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is all just kind of previewing stuff. So everyone, go watch NECC tonight. Have my show matches on first, but then also be watching NECC in the background. That's the way you should do it. And then we'll go through the Division 2 as well, because I think some of the matches are worth talking about. Kennesaw State Black, if Melodic and Shady are playing tonight, they did FF last week, but that could be a decent one against South Carolina. And then a little Florida battle between Embry Riddle and that's Ian's team, for those that didn't watch the episode on Friday, and UF. And then Charlotte and UCF could be good. It should be a pretty one-sided affair for Charlotte. And Winthrop Academy and UNCW. I don't know how that one might go.
These are all big test matches for everybody. Winthrop Academy did not look good this weekend. They struggled in CRL. UNCW have been high in NECC placements. I think that if all of these games are based off of NECC placements and CRL, they all should be good tests. Other than maybe Florida, then they should be fine against Ian. Also, Kennesaw Black is forfeiting the entire season.
Really?
I was told that last night over a 2 session. So yes, I've been told that the Kennesaw Black is not going to be playing NECC.
Oof.
Which that really does stink, because it's the second time in a row that a Kennesaw roster is forfeited out of NECC, at least back-to-back semesters.
Yeah.
So that does stink. But for USC, you get that win under your belt. I think that you could then make an argument that USC, as long as they handle Charlotte, they're a clear top 2 favorite.
Honestly, yeah, I think so as well. Maybe not clear, because them in Florida, they would have to get over Charlotte with
that's what I'm
pretty
saying.
dominant series. But yeah, I could see it. I clocked that too late. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. That's a fun one though for our boys. Like we know the South Carolina, Charlotte, and Florida boys pretty personally. Yeah. So I'm excited to keep an eye on East A, East B. I'm less excited about when it comes to big names, but there are still reasons to enjoy keeping up with this division. St. Clair Gold is in here. They're playing Kennesaw B this week, which St. Clair have lost some bad series in the last couple of weeks.
Don't even.
If they lose to Dylan,
no.
Clixie, and Reese, then I don't know what we're doing with that roster.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, respect to Dylan, Clixie, and Reese. Love those guys. But, okay, now let's actually be honest. If St. Clair Gold go to... I'm going to be bolder than you are. If they go to 5, this is messy. This is bad. St. Clair Gold should have absolutely no issues sweeping this tonight. And this right here should be the start of a climb back from falling, because then my next argument is that they shouldn't lose to any of these teams. But unfortunately, they already have lost to some of these teams. And Conestoga is one of the hottest names coming out of this group right now. And we're kind of surprised by it. But again, comparing CRL to NECC placements, this is another testing week where Waterloo plays Queens. Cleveland State should be A-OK against SMU. Fuel and Conestoga, if the paper results have anything to say, that should be a decent matchup. That could go to 6. Me personally, I think Conestoga sweep that.
They should. I mean, this is a great set of matchups for the nerds that actually follow the maybe 35 to 48 section of our rankings. So I'm excited. I'm excited to keep up with this, and I pray that St. Clair Gold right the ship, because that. Nah, we don't even need to speak that into existence. On the western side, Southeastern Oklahoma and Carthage is probably my Division II match of the week. Texas A&M and GCU could be decent, but Southeastern Oklahoma and Carthage are 2 talented rosters. Carthage I have ranked. Southeastern Oklahoma I don't, but I think they could be if they're able to pull off a win like this.
So I am on the opposite side of things. I do have Southeastern Oklahoma ranked. I think that what I've seen out of them over last year and also to the beginning of this year, I think that this right here is a result that we're on the same question, just different sides of it.
Yeah.
This is a good top 48 proving bracket for all of these teams, especially GCU and Carthage and Southeastern Oklahoma State. And when they all get to play each other, it'll be really interesting to see how things pan out. But also, GCU are not exactly getting away with a freebie. Texas A&M is not a gimme by any means.
Nope.
And I'm really intrigued to see how that one pans out. But I think GCU will be A-okay based off what CRL had for us. And then I like to think that Southeastern Oklahoma State should handle that series, but I also can see that going to 7.
Yeah, I don't know about handle it. I still think Carthage is a better team despite their CRL run, but
I don't disagree.
Yeah, we'll get that answer at 7:30 Central tonight. So everyone, I don't know where that might be streamed, Carthage stream or Southeastern Oklahoma stream, but in the other West Division, we also have some friends in this one. Purdue versus Tennessee is a gosh darn classic in the CRL space. Very different rosters, no more Enchanted, no more a lot of UTK players, but hey, it's Purdue and Tennessee, and I'm hoping Tennessee show up for this one because they FF'd last week against North Dakota.
I mean, with Joe Bro playing and him actually doing well, I like UTK's odds here.
Yeah.
I don't know where you draw the line on who's the favorite. I like to think that it's leaning maybe 60-40 UTK or maybe even a little more. But I like their odds here. Huntington, North Dakota, that's going to be a really interesting
Yes.
one. But I like Huntington's odds as long as they've been grinding ever since the weekend, because they struggled pretty heavily against some teams they shouldn't have, and Pink is Cat and the boys will make them look silly in those first few games. They're not ready. Also, some sleeper matchups. Well, one, maybe you're kind of hitting the snooze button on one. Maybe you're actually sleeping on. Waterloo, Davenport Red. This should be Davenport Red. But again, NECC placements, Waterloo looked good. And on the other side of that, NECC placements also show that Indiana dominate Illinois. It wasn't even close between those two teams when they played. Mm-hmm. And then Indiana almost beat Indiana Tech. So I like Indiana's odds. I think they handle that one. I'm going to use handle more literally than I did in the last group. I think this is a 4-0 win for Indiana. But the other three, I'm willing to hear out opinions on, but Davenport Red should also be mostly written down.
Snooze button for me. That is the Waterloo B team, for the record.
Oh,
I think
my bad.
Warriors Gold, who's playing Queens, and East B, which actually I want to check on that because
wait a minute.
You have Warriors Gold and you have Warriors Black. They're both from the University of Waterloo. One is in East B, the other is in West Central B. Go figure.
Is that correct? Wait, is that confirmed?
Yeah, I mean, I could send you the links right now to look through. Like, it's...
I'll take your word for it. Okay. All right, NECC. Tennessee's West Central and Waterloo is somehow in two different places. They better be on a state line. Because I don't know how you justify that. But you know what? Whatever. Whatever, man.
Waterloo.
Shout out NECC.
All right, we're gonna do some live research. Here we go. University of Waterloo. They are in Waterloo, Ontario. If you want a map as to exactly where in Ontario they are.
Oh, come on. Oh my God, they're West Central, guys. Oh my God, they're West Central.
Wow.
Oh my God. For reference, look where Bepic is. Doc's his location right now.
Oh yeah, I'm in Auburn.
Look at him in Alabama right now. If Alabama was ever put in West Central, there should be an issue. But also Knoxville. Knoxville was put in West Central. Yep. So if you're going off of that logic, maybe it's not that different. But wow, man. Okay. All right. Well, Waterloo, welcome to the West.
Yeah, West Central. A lot of Central is heavily lifting there. West Central. But we'll move on. In NACE, a reason why Waterloo B versus Davenport Red could be a good series. Could be. In NACE, this happened last night. Shawnee State reverse swept Davenport, and this is another reason why I think this Shawnee State team is going to be a lot better than we were expecting.
Yeah, we were very low on them going into the preseason, I won't lie. Losing Duckworth and kind of having to fend off with Spooky, who was GC2 at the time that we all reported. I wasn't expecting a lot, but it seems that Spooky is playing a decent role, and I can't hate on that at all, especially the reverse sweep. That means Spooky and the guys were actually consistently playing their roles and adjusting correctly. So Big ups to Shawnee. But also I will say, yes, Davenport Red, a very tough loss, but I didn't know it was the Waterloo B team because I didn't know Waterloo was somehow in 2 places at once. So I still like Davenport Red's odds, especially if it's the Waterloo B team. If it was the Waterloo A team, then I'd make an argument. But no, Davenport should be A-okay.
Then Lubbock Christian continued the trend of not being able to beat good teams, but still taking them to Game 5. So that's just a continuation of a talking point we've already hit. And then this right here is Winthrop. You can't tell because of the cropping with League Spot. Bruton Parker Christian University 3-1 Winthrop last night, but Phantom from the Academy team was playing for Garrett. That's context that's worth noting.
Yeah, I believe Garrett was actually at Squishy's wedding. So fair play for all the reasons you could miss a game there. I believe that's why, because I think on his Twitter that I saw him and Justin there. But anyways, so yeah, Phantom, but Phantom's still a good player. He's still a good player.
He looked pretty good.
I don't think. I don't know. They still shouldn't be losing that, in my opinion. But also a good win for Bruton Parker, because now when you talk about down the road for points and playoff positions, that win's going to mean a lot more regardless of who showed up on the day.
Yeah, I mean, Cass in one of those games overtimes hit one of the nastiest doubles that I've seen in all of the Rocket League I've watched in the last couple of months. So they stepped up. Cass had good moments. What's up? We got a special guest popping in.
He just got meta glasses. You could tell by the light in the other corner.
Yeah, we saw he was wearing them on broadcast in the Scenic City Invitational. So he's been getting his money's worth.
Oh my god, that's my dog right there. Oh man, he just got those glasses too. I'm sure I'm gonna hear from him all week about, hey, meta this, hey, meta that. Oh man. Anyways, special guests.
I love it. I love the little pop in. No, nothing good to talk about for your guys anymore. We got over the LAN win, the CRL qualification, but we can talk about Fisher putting a good win together. This was probably the one interesting result coming out of the Play Versus Collegiate League. Fisher 3-1 George Mason, and look who decided to make his CRL debut.
Okay, all right. So this is awesome that Memory is finally in the fray. But then I look and 3-1 to Fisher.
Yep.
So 2 things. One, this team has no experience together, so I can understand struggling. But I feel like even if it was solo, actually no, I take this back. This is not a bad loss. Having no experience, I'm gonna make a hot take. This is not a bad loss. Having no experience. Plus, with all due respect to Krazix, he does not look like a version of his old self at all. On LAN, he looked rough, and I would imagine that in this series, it was probably the same case. Like, I used to believe and think of Krazix as a rank X contending player, like as somebody who can make a top 16 on a given RLCS weekend, but I haven't seen that version of Krazix in a long time. So I actually think this matchup on paper, Fouls and Krazix are closer together than Krazix is to Kinsey. And I think that's my hot take there. And Fisher have been hot. So them winning in 4, I think that maybe my first knee-jerk reaction will be Fisher in 5. But also, Memory is a great player and a great coach. So it still does stink. But I don't know if it's an upset or a surprise just yet.
I would have agreed with you if George Mason hadn't made the run they did in CRL.
Fair.
Beating Boise State in 5 with Proto in instead of Memory, which, yes, there are a lot more reps with the Krazix / Trent, Kinsey, and Proto lineup. But Memory, I still think, is an upgrade into that roster no matter what kind of reps they have. No offense to Proto, I think Memory is, like you said, a top-tier coach and still top-tier player. And so for them to lose to Fisher, I still would consider that an upset. But it's the first look that we got with this trio, and so maybe they aren't going to be that much different with Memory in the lineup, which, I hope they put it together soon, because they've got some opens in the next couple of weeks that they need to be winning, because this should be a close qualifier team.
GMU should be better. I'll say, even with my hot takes, GMU should be better. And I think that down the road, we'll look back at it and say, how did they lose to Fisher? But as of right now, I'm thinking of a power ranking standpoint. I'm thinking too literally in the moment. I haven't seen enough, even with the run in CRL with Proto. Like, you cannot compare Proto and Memory, and you also can't compare the system that those two teams are probably playing. If I had to make a financial bet on this series, I would guarantee you that roster. I think George Mason, that roster's too defensive. All three of those players have been notable third men. I think they're too defensive. I think they got to figure out who's going to be the lead on that team. Because I think Proto brings the wild card aspect. Even though he may not be the most mechanical or consistent player,
Okay.
I think he brings the wild card, and that probably opens up rooms. So that's my analytical take. But regardless, Fisher as of right now, and I would even argue for the opens, I think I like Fisher.
Well, I have not gotten to watch any or much of George Mason this season, outside of them getting stomped by East Tennessee State at the City Invitational. Like, they didn't even play offense, it felt like. So I'll have to do some reviewing on them, because that should be a good team. Hey, good on Fisher, though, for winning 3-1 after they got upset by Syracuse, who lost in, it says 4-3. It was actually a 3-2. PEC matches are best of fives. But Boise State in 5 ended up beating Syracuse, and this was a couple of nights ago on September 30th. So Boise State getting a win against a top 20 opponent.
I mean, again, based on what we've seen in the last few weeks, this matchup looks a lot closer before CRL and after CRL than it does 3 weeks ago or a month ago.
Yeah, true.
And I'm very happy that Syracuse is building up to this team and to this level, because Boise also showed some struggle points. So I think now they're moving closer together. Boise stepped back a little bit. Syracuse stepped up a lot. So very impressive results. And also Baylor, Nebraska. Is that the Baylor B team, or is that
no?
the A team?
That would be the A team. I didn't look at this one. I don't really clock Game 5 wins for top teams like this.
Look at the shots. Oh my god.
Non-NECC or CRL. I don't know.
Okay, well, two things. One, I did not know that Mincy and Creed were on Nebraska. That makes this loss a little bit more reasonable. Or not loss. It makes the series a little bit more reasonable. But also, look at the shot. Jeez. Like, okay, it's just one of those series where it was a matter of time before they scored. They were probably shooting like -2%. So, fair play.
I don't know. I think I've gotten to the point where I'm of the opinion that in most cases, if a team is heavily favored, even if they go to Game 5 in a best of 5 series, if they still win, I don't really knock them, because we've got so many different leagues in CRL this season where there are going to be times where you're not fully locked in against a team, or you're messing around a bit against a team. You lose a couple games you shouldn't, but if at the end of the day you get the series win, I don't know if I'm holding that against rosters at this point.
Yeah, I'm right there in the same boat. We purely agree on that point. I just like reading into it because the shot number was important there. I'm glad we clicked on it, because it's nice to know that that was a series where they just couldn't find the back of the net, and that was it.
And I'm looking at C3 right now to see if there's anything notable that happened. And actually, yeah, there's one I want to bring up. Now that we're talking regional results, got to update the overlay. South Carolina 3-1 Clemson, which was a revenge match, because the last time these two played, I think Clemson got the win. It was in CCS in Game 5. So South Carolina, they're righting some wrongs from previous in the season.
I mean, Clemson fresh off a LAN as well. I don't hate this result. I think 3-1 is about the most perfect prediction you can make. That Clemson is good enough to take this USC roster, but also USC has been way too hot, and they're way too dangerous on offense to kind of survive a full series most of the time. So I'm okay with these results.
And that's pretty much it with C3. If you are into Carolina Esports, though, definitely follow and keep up with them. They stream every Tuesday, I do believe. So definitely follow the C3 Esports League, Power Esports Conference as well if you're into that. It's what PEC was, for those that may not know. And then Southeastern Esports League, I have the wrong hyperlink, so give me a second to get to results, because there were some notable results in the SEL. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I think talking about Florida Southern beating Huntington in 5 was a really good win for them. Bruton Parker Academy also suffering another loss, and then this is still Tier 1 Group 1. James Madison looked phenomenal. You and I casted this one on stream, and JMU look so good with Fright. It seems like they're hard work is starting to pay off.
What's crazier is that Fright looked like maybe even the most offensive player, the most dangerous player in that entire game, and that's in a lobby with Astro.
Yeah, yeah.
So for your new third, for your rookie to look as good as they do and as dangerous as they do, I'm actually really excited for this James Madison roster because obviously losing Pigeon, that's a big loss for any program across the nation, regardless. So I'm just glad they're able to bounce back. And then going across the table, Huntington fresh off a LAN, couldn't find it against USC. Again, fairly expected there. I'm very, very intrigued to see that Kennesaw A. Bruton Parker Academy game because the way that Kyler talks about this Academy roster, he thinks that this roster studies any roster and can play around them. So if they push that series to maybe a close overtime in 4 or maybe even 5, we might have to have some conversations about Bruton Parker and their redemption arc for the Academy team, but that should be done and dusted.
And so that's tier 1, and then elsewhere in tier 1, nothing too crazy because ETSU, Cumberland, and Bruton Parker are all in the same group, and so until they play each other, I don't think we're going to get anything interesting out of this group outside of a Buds and Clemson grudge match that those two are getting used to playing, and the Buds are 2-0 against Clemson in the last couple of weeks, so that's turning into a little mini Southeastern rivalry.
Yeah, we'll have to keep a very close eye on SCL as our best results are yet to come. We have a lot of great games.
Yep.
And also not to mention that Tier 2 is about to get even messier every week as well. There's too much talent that's too even in Tier 2. So that LCQ is going to be a great topic on the podcast down the road. But I think outside of our regional leagues, we only have one more thing to talk about.
Yeah, and we'll do it real quick because these are just qualifiers. But the Battle for Florida is happening on October 26th. And the qualifiers happened about 2 weeks ago now. So these results are 2 weeks old, but I wanted to at least advertise the Battle for Florida because I love regional competition like this. But Kaiser beating University of Florida and FIU in their run, and Daytona State qualifying for the Battle for Florida LAN, and then UF and FIU making it out of a actually pretty stacked lower bracket when you see FAU, UCF, Florida Tech, Florida Southern, and FIU down there too. So I mean, pretty interesting. If you like Florida Rocket League, definitely check it out.
And what an awful week for Florida Southern too. Too unfortunate, or an awful few weeks, I guess, for them. To fall down to 2 decent rosters in Daytona State and Florida. But, man, they're really struggling to find success. But also, for USF finding a 6-game series against FIU, I'm pretty well impressed there. UCF going down in 3 wouldn't have been on my bingo card. They actually look pretty decent within NECC. But Florida going to losers in this bracket, I can't say my money was on them to do that. But at least they made it either way. They'll be a threat at LAN.
They will be the 4th seed. I believe the matchups for round 1 will be Kaiser in Florida and Daytona State versus FIU. And that's on October 26th. So a lot of Rocket League to be played between now and then, which that brings us to our next segment, which is going to be brief as well. We've got a partnership in the works, which if you haven't heard of RL Data Coach, he is a guy that has been very dedicated to analyzing Rocket League from a completely statistical standpoint for the last several months. There are some schools working with him because he has this tool that is, I believe it's a artificial intelligence that has studied Rocket League and has broken it down to stats that we'll go over when we do start to have this segment. But like expected goals in situations, or first man defense, second man defense, near post challenges through the corner, stuff like that, like really deep parts of RL that don't get talked about often. And so we're going to be starting up a kind of series of the week segment on Collegiate Exclusive. And so right now, this is why we bring it up. If you have a series of the week that you know there are replays from, if you are a player that can save replays for an interesting series of the week, please hit me or TJ up because we can study it at an in-depth level on the podcast, and we'll be doing that going forward. So I know we're looking forward to that partnership, TJ.
Yeah, a huge shout out to Data Coach for reaching out to us. When we get to show you guys the work that he's been doing, it is not comparable to anything that you have seen before. It is very impressive the amount of data that is collected within his team and the tools that they've created. Not to also mention that you guys should go follow him on X. Go to RL Data Coach on X, because some of the stuff that they tweet is actually really intriguing to see. Like during Worlds, they had a lot of metadata collected. And talking about expected goals per game, how well they were converting, expected goals allowed, and then how well they were converting on their defense. It's been very cool to see. Also, Kronovi and Metsanoris work with these guys.
Yes.
And trust me, we can't reveal who Data Coach works with, but I promise you guys that there is some great talent who works with him.
And so that'll be coming down the pipeline, looking to debut that next week. So definitely keep an eye on the podcast for that reason. But we got to get to the segment that everybody loves. This is the accolades of the week, where we give our player and team of the week awards. And I don't know if there's any other player in the entire CRL space that was going to win this award this week after what happened on CRL Sunday. The player of the week is JT, 3-time Collegiate Exclusive Podcast Player of the Week, had himself a weekend in CRL, qualified to league play. You'll get to see him on Sundays for the next 4 weeks. This guy deserves, if we had a plaque we could give him, it'd be the JT Player of the Week plaque, because he's becoming a legend in the space.
Yeah, JT for both of us.
Yes,
and this is now my third time. My third time putting JT as Player of the Week. So all that I'm going to say is that me and Bepic are believers, but I am the JT believer, and I will stand on that. So big shout out to JT and Baylor and for what they built. They also tagged us on Twitter, so shout out to Coach Stanley and the social team for doing that, giving Collegiate Exclusive a little bit of exposure. But yeah, wow, Baylor's success over the last month. If there was a Player of the Month award, it still goes to JT, who's easily been the most talked about new face in terms of everything. And you said it before you got into that. There is so much chaos in the CRL quals and through NECC and through NACE that it's easy for us to name a bunch of non-players of the week, but we're not that negative, so we got to give it to the best of the best. And JT, surprisingly, but also as of late, not surprisingly, looks to be the biggest face to look out for in terms of wild cards in the scene.
And then Team of the Week, in a similar vein, kind of came out of nowhere after people started doubting them, especially after their performance in the colleague pre-jump tournament over the summer. Oklahoma Christian, they made it to league play as well, and they pulled off some big upsets against Kennesaw State, against Akron to get there. And so I'm so happy for these guys to get a chance in the top 8 league play to show their stuff further, because they looked rough in pre-jump, but man, have they been preparing for the one CRL day that they got to show themselves off and get into that first split of league play where there's a good bit of money on the line. So shout out to G-Man, Chili, and North. Those dudes deserve my team of the week, because they're top 8, baby, out of nowhere.
And on the other side of that, I'm not going to jump to mine just yet. I do want to talk about OC. Again, their bracket run was incredible. It's some of the best work they've done ever since signing that roster, especially given the pretext of how much they've struggled. So OC mentally looking like demons, and I think that they're going to show that to everybody in league play. And if they even breathe at the closed qualifier, I think that they're going to really catch some teams off guard. So shout out to OC. On the other side of things, my team of the week, you could make an argument for Baylor. That's the obvious one. But since we did JT, I went a different route.
Yeah.
I actually chose Michigan State. Of all the rosters we have consistently ranked in the top 20, Michigan State went to the PEC event. They got kind of rolled, or not kind of rolled. It just didn't look good against Boise State. And I really was starting to lose a little bit of hope on this roster. But they made the pick for Moorview for a reason. They like the system. They trust their coaches and what they're building. And I saw it firsthand. Michigan State did beat us in uppers, and they unironically could have gotten a CRL top 8 spot. I will not lie by any means. So big shout out to Michigan State. I think they're one of the biggest shock rosters who didn't make it to CRL.
Those guys are very motivated, and if they had been in a maybe like pool 5 through 8, and they could be in league play right now, but being put in the same pool as Concord, where you have to win the entire bracket to make it, is it's a little rough. But they got that one win, and that's a showcase of what they can do. And even in those 2-3-1 losses, I was still thinking for a second that with the weekend that Concord had, that you guys had to go through on LAN, and then playing in that convention center, I honestly thought Michigan State might be upsetting. And I was like, man, it is going to be awkward walking out of the convention center and saying goodbye to those guys after not making league play. But, you know, you got it over the line. Michigan State really did kind of push the limits there.
And again, they and Syracuse, both in the Power Esports Conference, both up north, they are system schools, and that's what it takes to win. Ball State, a system team. Akron, a system team. Northwood, one of the only few who get away with not being a system team because they are just so good and consistent. Also, St. Clair Green's in that conversation. But even if you want to make arguments, even for like us, OC, like we are system teams. And if you are not able to find identity, then you have nothing to grind out. You have nothing to improve on and nothing to surprise teams with. So, anyways, both OC and Michigan State, very surprising system rosters making it out of the weekend with big wins.
All right, we are about to talk rankings, and we have 5 or so minutes to do it. So we'll run through it. But we've talked enough rankings this weekend where I don't think people are going to be missing too much. But let's do our top 48s real fast. This is going to look jank at the start because my OBS is tripping a little bit, so I'm gonna have to adjust on the fly. But here we go. I'm flashbanging everyone, and you'll have to deal with it because this is our podcast, and mine are cut off. Give me just one moment to position it properly. Boom! There we go.
Oh wow, there we go. Well, let's talk about our thoughts and kind of where things stand. Also, shout out Bepic's tabs on top of the Google as well. Look how organized that man is, using a different version of Chrome there. But anyways, so Northwood, Concord, St. Clair, Winthrop, West Virginia. Okay, cool, fine. Top seeds, made it through, makes sense. Now let's talk about the rest.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I was still cropping. So my big changes were integrating the teams that made big runs in CRL into the top 8. So no surprises to have Baylor and Oklahoma Christian joining those boys. But Michigan State, ETSU both made big jumps. I wanted to reward ETSU for the performance on LAN and for their pretty good performance outside of their series against Cumberland in CRL. Same sort of line of thinking for Michigan State, where I wanted to reward their deep run and win over Concord. And then Kennesaw State definitely looked good on LAN. Their win over Akron certainly helped. At Akron, I didn't really know how to place them because on one hand, dropping them to 14 seemed harsh, but they lost to both Oklahoma Christian and to Kennesaw, and they don't have many results with the full starting lineup this fall. So I think 14 might have to be where they start to work their way back from for now.
Yeah, we are both some of the first people to release rankings after CRL, and I think when people see Akron, we're going to get a very heavy kickback. Seeing Akron at anything other than top 8 or top 9, this is pretty hard to stomach. Yeah. I can't lie. Especially, like, I went really, really back and forth about dropping them above or below Kennesaw. I think that, for example, like my rankings come out tomorrow. NECC goes through tonight. So my rankings might change from tonight to tomorrow when I release them to the public and I get harassed. I think I'm going to move Akron back up a few notches, but their losses are bad that it's hard to justify anything otherwise when Davenport Black and Kennesaw and Michigan State were all one series away from making it, or I guess 2 for some of them. It is crazy to sit here and say that Akron is barely top 15. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and there's only so much room at the top, and I think you need to reward the teams that get big wins, that show they can get big wins, which Akron really hasn't done yet. So we're waiting on that, but it is weird not to have them at the very top. And then we'll go down further where it is kind of the same sort of mix of teams. You've got LCU a lot higher than me, which I think we've already debated on Friday when we did our show, which nothing really changed. They lost the teams that they were supposed to lose to and beat the teams they were supposed to beat. Bruton Parker, we've got the same. Ball State Black bumped up because of their wins and performance on Sunday. And I mean, it's kind of the same from there on out. I think we have very similar rankings because we actually have quality wins and losses to judge these teams on, finally.
Yeah, I think the big places that we differ on, let's talk about the teams who have yet to prove themselves. Let's talk about Columbia and Wichita. They play this coming week, and we will have to see what happens once that series is played. So we agree on Wichita, but Columbia is a little different. I am still a little low on that stock, but it's also because I value Syracuse and Fisher's wins better.
Yeah,
The
that's
hard
fair.
part for both of us is, where does Akron Gold go? Because they didn't play. Because all we saw was Milio in a system that isn't built for him anymore.
Yeah.
And it's hard to rank that team. So I think keeping them top 20 contenders is fine. Again, the hard part is just figuring out where do they match in all of this. Me and you feel very differently on LCU. I think that's one of our big argument points. LCU were shafted by having to play Northwood, and yes, they have some bad losses, but of all the teams that I've already given up on, I think that's one of my big shocker picks, is that I still see potential in LCU. And it's early in the season, but I can hear the argument for them to be lower. I completely get it.
I see the potential, but at the same time, they have Game 5 losses to St. Edwards and Bruton Parker at this point. And you have to factor in those losses, especially with Bruton Parker being around the 23 mark. Like, that's a head-to-head win for BPCU, and while I think LCU have looked a bit better than Bruton Parker, and maybe BPCU's losses have brought them down a little bit, I just can't justify putting Lubbock Christian a lot further up.
Because they lost to Michigan State. Sorry, CMOS is bombarding my episode here. Yeah, and that
live debates.
He's mad at me. He's mad at me that I didn't put my team at 1, which is kind of fair.
I mean, between Northwood and Concord, one of those
we get to play
schools.
Northwood next week.
Yeah, there you go. You got the head-to-head.
All right, he said I'm fired. All right, he said I'm fired. All right, well, I just lost my job, my scholarship. So,
all right.
Anyways, let's keep moving down with the rankings. Other big points of contention.
Maryland.
Is St. Clair Gold? Oh.
St. Clair Gold we've talked about. We've been like, it's the same story.
But are they a top 32 team?
I don't know.
I guess they are barely. Like, I'm kind of surprised. I think that if CRL happened maybe a few days later, St. Clair Gold is still outside of the top 32. But there was too much going on with some of the rosters that we thought were going to stay in there that we kind of moved them back up. Big ups to UNCC and WCTC, who were great, but weren't impressive enough to then counteract St. Clair Gold.
Charlotte didn't play in CRL either. I was hoping they would, because I actually wanted some better results other than CCS and C3, but is what it is. Maryland, though, and Cleveland State both benefited from good CRL runs.
Bro, my whole team is about to come in here and flame my rankings now. Anyways, we can keep moving on, because I know we're on a time crunch here. You guys got scrims in 5 minutes, by the way.
Yeah, tell him, coach. Tell him.
I'm good. No, CMOS is begging me to scroll up. I'm not doing it. All right, so let's talk about the rest of the rankings here. So we got Maryland right outside the top 32. It's okay. All right. Anyways, they're trashing me because I don't have us at 1, but I get kicked off the poll if I put us at 1 every week. This is all for content. It's all for content.
There it is.
I know, but Northwood also looked the best out of any team in their pool because they had the easiest one, and it's power rankings. They change every week. Anyways, all right, let's speed run.
Welcome to my life.
Maryland top 32 contenders. Maryland top 32 contenders. Yes, this is fair. This is good. This is our biggest shock in both of our rankings, but I also think it is a justifiable shock.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they had good wins. Like, I think their CRL run speaks for itself, and I think we can keep going because of the time.
For me, I currently don't have Carthage placed. That's one of my big question marks. I will probably have a change coming after NECC, but my biggest issue with Carthage is that on paper and consistently, I haven't seen enough over time for me to put stock in them.
So their 4-1 win over Mount Aloysius on Wednesday Night Lights means nothing to you.
Which, don't get me wrong, I love a good Night Lights match, but I can't view that as a power ranking. That's where I draw the line, is that if the only positive result, because also within CRL quals, I didn't see anything impressive.
How about in Wisconsin Collegiate Rocket League, a Game 5 loss WCTC?
Right, okay, well, I don't follow. This is on me for not following Wisconsin Collegiate Rocket League, so that's on me. I didn't even know that happened, so I guess...
All right, Wisconsin boys, get them. Get him.
Okay, that's on me. That's on me. I haven't been follow. Look, I like to think I follow almost everything. If that's the one regional league I missed, then fair play. Okay, so let me just say this then. I still believe that on my list, Carthage does not crack the top 40. I will stand on that. I think you can put them right behind or right ahead of Drexel, and I'm A-okay with that. I know that they played Mount Aloysius. I know they 4-1 them, but recency, like power rankings are a recency bias, and I like how Mount Aloysius looks, especially with Field of Frames. I like how they looked at that event. So that might be my hottest take, but if we're all being entirely honest, and I get flamed on Twitter for this, the bottom 10 teams in the top 48 are just simply toss-ups.
Yeah, it's hard.
They're awful. Like, it is impossible. And I know we're going to catch a lot of flack for Shawnee, specifically from Shawnee State. I know we're going to catch a lot of flack for that team, but we all agree, me and you are both in agreement on most of the bottom teams for the same reason. They have good wins, but nothing great. Not yet.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of our time, and if you want to harass TJ on Twitter, go for it. His DMs are always open. But
They are.
Wednesday Night Lights is going to follow this episode of the Collegiate Exclusive Podcast, and we have St. Clair Gold playing San Diego State. Ignore the numbers on this. Was made with my previous rankings. And then Kaiser versus Florida, Davenport Red versus Conestoga College. This is, I call it the battle of the deep cuts, because these are all kind of 32 through 48 ranked rosters, which should be good Wednesday Night Lights. But TJ, we got to get you to call in whatever your sport you're calling. So everyone go follow DJTJ RL on Twitter. Follow me as well, Bepic Casts there, and stay tuned for Wednesday Night Lights. And follow us on Spotify and drop a 5-star rating, Collegiate Exclusive Podcast. That's us. See you later.